I'm Ava Parker, 33 years old, and the first time I see our new family portrait, my face is washed into the woodwork while my sister shines like she's lit from within. The canvas leans against my father's desk, the paint still smelling faintly of linseed, and I can hear my mother in the doorway telling me not to be dramatic. My father's voice follows, warm and booming, planning the lighting for tonight's unveiling, as if the painting were a foregone fact, and I were extra furniture. I kneel to collect the papers that spilled from my research journal and notice the artist's note central focus on Brooke, written like a company directive. I steady my hands and take a single photo, not to make a scene, but to remember what they chose to see. My mother reminds me that we all have our roles, and I nod, because I've learned that silence preserves funding and calm keeps doors open. The room hums with the quiet of polished wood and old money, and yet the air feels crowded, as if every slight from the last 3 decades is standing right behind me. By the time the house staff wheels in the champagne, I know I won't stand in the back without thinking very hard about it. Before I go any further, let me know where you're listening from in the comments and tap that like and subscribe if you've ever had to hold your ground when someone tried to push you into the corner. I grew up in a split-level ranch on a cul-de-sac where neighbors waved from mailboxes and summer smelled like fresh-cut grass and charcoal, long before my father's company moved us into a world of mahogany monograms and quiet rules you didn't learn until you broke them. My mother taught me to write thank you notes before dessert and to return borrowed dishes with something sweet inside. Kindness wasn't a speech. It was a habit, one you practiced whether people were watching or not. When Parker Industries took off, the house got larger, the table longer, and the holidays more orchestrated, but I kept the same ground-level compass. Do your work. Give credit. Pay attention to the person who clears the plates. That compass led me into science, into the patient stubborn work of untangling problems that don't yield to charm hours at the bench trial by Data Joy in the first clean curve after a month of noise. My sister Brooke learned a different choreography introductions, first eye contact, that fills a room the right story for the right donor. And she was good at it. So good that people started calling her the future of the company before any of us were old enough to rent a car. By the time I finished my doctorate, the contrast between my days and my family's evenings felt like a shift in temperature. In the lab, we ate sandwiches at our desks and cheered over a successful assay, and at home, Crystal chimed and names were repeated like passwords. My work lived in fluorescent light and spreadsheets funded in part by a family foundation that looked generous on paper and exacting up close the kind of help that sits across from you and asks to see your progress with a smile that means, remember who's writing the check. I told myself it was a partnership, a way to keep the doors open for the team I was building at the Westbridge Institute. Still, I noticed small edits in company newsletters and introductions at events where my title thinned out to Ava, our scientist, while Brooke's biography grew an extra paragraph every quarter. No one said the word invisible, and I didn't either, because invisibility is a sliding scale, and some days you tell yourself there's safety in the shade. On other days, you look at a portrait and realize someone placed you there on purpose. The night of the unveiling begins like so many Parker gatherings, black dresses, black cars, and a hush that feels expensive, yet something quiet inside me stands up and stretches, as if it's been sitting too long. I dress in a dark sheath my mother would call appropriate, and tuck my lab badge into my bag, like a small promise to myself. I know I'm here as a daughter, but I'm also here as a working woman who keeps a team paid and a project moving. When I step into my father's study again, the portrait gleams beneath its velvet cover, and the family decides where we will stand later, like chess pieces that always know their squares. My mother mentions seating charts, my father mentions the editor who will join us, and I remind my breath to stay even, as if I'm about to present new data to skeptical eyes. I tell myself to get Brooke's leather portfolio from her study, the one she lends me when I need something that says serious without shouting, and I head down the hall with the smallest hope that tonight will pass neatly if I do everything the usual way. The hallway is quiet, except for the sound of voices turned a little brighter for an audience, and my hand touches the cool brass of Brooke's door just as a sentence rises that isn't meant to travel. I pause because anyone would, because the wrong step on old hardwood could turn a private moment into a scene, and because something in her tone pricks like a nail under paint. I tell myself I'm here for a portfolio, not a confrontation, and I breathe once, twice the way I do before a delicate transfer under the hood. Then her words land clear as glass feature Dad and me, my sister, isn't part of the company story. I don't turn the knob. I let my hand fall to my side and listen to the house breathing around me, wondering how carefully I'll need to move from this moment forward. I keep my hand on the doorknob a moment longer, the words still circling in my mind like a low echo. My sister's voice carries that easy confidence she's been praised for since high school, smooth and sure, the sound of someone used to being believed. Feature Dad and me, she'd said, her tone deliberate. My sister isn't really part of the company story. I stay there in the hallway until the silence on the other side of the door feels heavier than the words themselves. Then I walk away without knocking, my reflection caught in a framed photo along the corridor, Brooke and me at 12 and 15, both in matching white dresses, her smile open and practiced, mine half-turned, already cautious. That evening, the Parker dining room gleams like a stage. Every seat is assigned, every plate identical, every moment rehearsed. My mother moves through the room with the poise of someone hosting not a family dinner, but a small political summit. The table stretches long enough that conversation travels in waves rather than words. I'm seated at the far end beside Uncle Henry and Cousin Carol. My father, my mother, and Brooke sit clustered near the head, beside Daniel Price, the editor from American Enterprise. Their laughter rises in bursts that don't quite reach where I am. I fold my napkin and wait for the first course to appear, keeping my expression neutral. My father stands halfway through the meal glass, lifted high, his voice strong enough to quiet the room. "Our Brooke has shown exceptional leadership," he says. "The board voted unanimously to promote her to executive vice president. Effective immediately. Polite applause follows silverware chiming against crystal. I join in with everyone else smiling when Brooke's eyes sweep the room and land briefly on me, as if checking that I remember my cue. My mother opens a velvet box with a practiced flourish, revealing the Parker sapphires, my grandmother's necklace, the one she once told me would someday be mine. A perfect symbol, my mother says, fastening it around Brooke's neck, for the woman carrying our family's legacy forward. Daniel Price leans forward, his interest mild and polite. "And you must be—" He looks toward me, squinting slightly the way people do when trying to place a face they've seen before. "Are you new to the company?" The question feels almost innocent, until I remember that we've met before 3 times, in fact, at fundraisers where I discussed his daughter's interest in science. Before I can speak, Brooke slides smoothly into the pause. "This is my sister Ava," she says. "She does some research supported by the Parker Foundation." Some research. The words fall soft and harmless to anyone else, but to me, they sound like an eraser across a page. "Lovely," Daniel says, already turning back to my father. "You must be proud." By dessert, the pattern settles into place again. Brooke's promotion is toasted, the foundation's future discussed, and my presence acknowledged just enough to avoid comment. I keep my focus on a single chocolate truffle, watching the way the chandelier's light breaks into thin colors across the tablecloth. My mother approaches quietly, her perfume familiar, her tone even quieter. "You've been rather silent tonight," she says, adjusting a votive candle, as if the conversation were casual. "Just observing," I answer. "Good," she replies, smiling faintly. "You remember the grant review committee meets next month. It would be unfortunate if the panel heard of any disagreements." Her hand rests lightly on my arm for a moment, warm, controlled, and final. Then she turns away. I don't trust myself to speak, so I reach for water instead. The glass feels cold against my fingers, a small reminder that I'm still present in a room that spent years teaching me how not to be. When the dinner ends, the guests drift toward the grand hall for the portrait unveiling. I follow behind slow enough that no one notices. Ruth Larkin, the artist, stands near the entrance holding a flute of champagne. Her gray hair is swept into a low twist, her eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. She spots me and steps closer. "They insisted on the composition," she says softly. "I tried to keep your expression honest." Her voice carries both apology and defiance. I nod once, the gratitude unspoken but clear. The next morning, I wake to the sound of my phone buzzing against the nightstand. Dozens of notifications blink across the screen: emails, texts, social media mentions. Brooke's post sits at the top, a cropped version of the portrait showing her framed in golden light, while my figure lingers half in shadow. Her caption reads, "Finally an image that captures everyone in their rightful place." The comments are full of congratulations, heart emojis, and praise for her poise and leadership. I scroll once, twice, then stop. My phone buzzes again. Messages from colleagues, old classmates, even Dr. Williams from my father's golf club. "Are you okay? Always knew your family dynamic was unique. Call if you need to talk." I set the phone face down and stare at the ceiling, counting each slow breath until the tremor in my hand fades. By midday, my mother calls her tone bright. "Darling, North Shore Magazine will be interviewing us right after the unveiling," she says. "Wonderful exposure for Brooke." I wait for her to mention me, and when she doesn't, I ask quietly, "And what about my contribution to the company's research branch?" There's a pause long enough to hear her inhale. "Well, that's not really the focus of the article, dear." Then she shifts to another subject, her voice as smooth as if we'd never spoken. At the lab that afternoon, Dr. Mercer drops a report on my desk. "Ava," he says, "why isn't your name listed here under research achievements? Your bioregeneration project was entirely funded by the Parker Foundation." I scan the page, seeing every name except mine. The omission is surgical, as if someone went through and cut away a single thread. Dr. Mercer frowns. "This isn't an oversight. This is erasure." The word lands heavy, direct, and accurate. I close the report and set it aside, nodding once. I know he's right, but the confirmation still feels like a bruise touched too soon. That night, I spread my journals across the floor of my apartment, each one filled with notes, data, and fragments of recognition that never made it into the official record. Photographs where I'm placed at the edge, company newsletters with my name shortened or omitted, emails where my suggestions are summarized as team input. I line them up in chronological order, building a timeline that spans 3 decades of quiet removals. The pattern is unmistakable once it's laid bare, years of carefully edited history designed to make one daughter glow and the other fade. 2 days later, a message arrives at my office from Linda Cho, my father's longtime assistant. It's just one line: "Stop by the building after 4. I have something for you." When I find her, she's waiting in a narrow hallway outside my father's office. "Take this," she whispers, sliding a manila folder into my hands. "Don't mention where you got it." Inside are yellowed clippings from old newspapers. My science fair wins early research features even a note in my father's handwriting. Ava's approach to cellular regeneration shows promise. My throat tightens, but I thank her quietly. "He notices more than he shows," Linda says before she turns and disappears around the corner. I carry the folder out of the building and into the cold evening air, my steps slow, my mind turning over what it means to be recognized privately but denied publicly. The lights from the upper floors of Parker Industries glow against the winter sky, and I wonder which office holds the version of my story that will be told next. At home, I tuck the folder beside my journals and close the lid of the box that holds both. Tomorrow there will be another dinner, another arrangement of seats and smiles. But tonight I know something I didn't before invisibility can be documented, proven, and named. And once you name it, it's no longer quiet. The folder from Linda stays unopened on my kitchen counter for most of the night. The weight of it feels heavier than paper, more like 30 years of quiet evidence. When I finally lift the flap, the yellowed clippings slide out one by one. Science fair headlines, early research write-ups, notes in my father's handwriting. Each one is a small window into a version of me that once mattered to him. I sit on the floor until the sky outside lightens, reading and rereading the same lines, unsure if I'm more surprised by his recognition or by how carefully he chose to hide it. The next day I take the folder to the lab, not to show anyone, but because it feels wrong to leave it behind. The building hums with the familiar rhythm of machines and voices, the steady pulse of work that doesn't care about family politics. Dr. Mercer pauses at my door and glances at the folder. "You look like someone carrying the answer to a question nobody asked," he says, half smiling. I tell him I've been reviewing old records and he nods, sensing there's more but choosing not to ask. For most of the day, I bury myself in data reviewing charts and refining notes, but the words from those clippings keep circling back, shows promise, innovative mind, remarkable precision. The same qualities that built the foundation my family now pretends doesn't exist. That evening, I return home to find an embossed envelope on my doorstep, an invitation to the final rehearsal dinner before the portrait unveiling. Inside, my mother's handwriting loops across the card, formal attire. Family photo immediately following. I close the envelope and set it aside. The air in my apartment feels tight, like there's not enough room for everything I'm carrying. The old papers, the upcoming event, the quiet exhaustion of being erased over and over again. By the time the evening of the rehearsal arrives, I'm operating on autopilot. The mansion's front doors open to the scent of roses and polished silver. Staff move quietly through the hall, arranging chairs and candles. My father is at the far end of the room discussing lighting angles with the event coordinator. My mother spots me instantly. "Ava," she says, "I was hoping you'd choose something softer." The charcoal dress feels a bit severe next to Brooke's emerald gown. I glance down at the dress I spent an hour debating over plain structured and the only thing that feels like armor. "It'll do," I answer, and her lips tighten before she turns away. Brooke stands in front of a mirror, adjusting the necklace that once belonged to our grandmother. She looks radiant, exactly as the occasion demands. "Can you zip this for me?" she asks without turning around. I step forward, fasten the clasp, and meet her eyes in the mirror. For a moment, we're just sisters again, two girls in matching dresses in our mother's room before a school recital. Then she breaks the silence. "I hope you're not planning to make tonight about your lab. The press wants a clear company narrative." Her tone isn't cruel, just efficient, like she's reciting something she believes is true. "Don't worry," I say softly. "I know my place." Dinner that night passes like a carefully edited broadcast. The same names, the same stories polished and recited for an audience that knows the ending. I sit between two board members who talk across me, each assuming I have nothing to add. The conversation drifts toward research, patents, innovation, and I listen as Brooke credits our father's leadership for initiatives that began at my own desk. Dr. Franklin catches my eye from farther down the table, his expression thoughtful. When the plates are cleared, my mother rises to make a short toast about family legacy, and I excuse myself quietly, stepping into the hallway before the applause dies down. The corridor is lined with portraits of past generations, men in tailored suits, women with calm, untroubled faces. I walk slowly, the heels of my shoes soft against the carpet. Halfway down Ruth Larkin, the artist appears from the direction of the grand hall. "Almost ready for tomorrow," she says, with a small, tired smile. "They asked me to adjust the lighting again." More gold around Brooke's face. Her voice lowers. "I kept the tones around you cool and steady. It felt honest." I thank her, not because it changes anything, but because honesty feels rare in this house. When I return home, my phone lights up again with messages. This time, they're from colleagues who've seen Brooke's latest interview online. She's quoted discussing our family's research values, claiming the company's scientific progress stems from collaborative leadership. My name doesn't appear once. I scroll until the words blur, then close the screen. Sleep doesn't come easily. My body feels heavy, but my mind refuses to stop moving. Around 2 a.m, I pull out the journals from the box again and start laying them across the floor in chronological order. Each page holds a small truth, a conference program, a signed lab memo, an email from a sponsor crediting my team. Together they tell a story that contradicts the one my family has built. By dawn, the apartment looks like an evidence room. The walls are lined with pinned documents, printed photos, annotated drafts. I open my laptop and begin digitizing the collection, scanning each page with careful precision. The process is tedious, but it's grounding. There's something calming about seeing everything lined up and named. Years of quiet omission take shape in a pattern that can finally be measured. 2 days before the unveiling, the lab feels unusually still. Most of the staff are at a conference across town, leaving just a handful of us working. I'm in the break room when Dr. Franklin walks in, a manila envelope in his hand. "This came through internal mail," he says. Thought you'd want to see it. Inside is a draft of the Foundation's annual report, the same one that removed my name weeks ago. Only now the omission has been corrected. My name appears beneath the headline, Parker Foundation Research Achievements Regeneration Program, Lead Dr. Ava Parker. I glance up at him surprised. I didn't ask for this, I say. I know, he replies, but someone must have. He waits, then adds quietly, You've been the backbone of this work for years. It's about time someone noticed. I fold the report and slip it into my briefcase, unsure whether to feel vindicated or wary. That evening, while leaving the lab, I pass through the lobby and see Linda waiting near the elevators. Congratulations, she says softly. Your father reviewed the new report this morning. He didn't comment, but he didn't remove it either. Her voice carries something close to relief. That's a start. The next day rehearsal for the unveiling runs late. Photographers test lighting assistants arrange seating, and my family hovers near the front reviewing the guest list. My mother pulls me aside once more. During the ceremony, she says, Please stand a little farther back when the photos begin. The focus will be on Brooke and your father. Her tone is polite, her words practiced. I hold her gaze for a long moment, then nod slowly. All right, I say, and walk away before she can add anything else. I can feel her watching me, waiting for the familiar compliance that used to come so easily. That night, I sit at my desk and look at the organized folders on my screen, each one labeled time-stamped complete. I realize I'm no longer collecting proof for them, I'm collecting it for me. The portrait unveiling is tomorrow, and for the first time, I know exactly what I'm walking into. I close my laptop, slip the printed report into my bag, and turn off the lights. The apartment goes quiet except for the steady hum of the refrigerator, the sound of something constant and ordinary. Outside, the city glows against the dark, and I stand at the window watching it until the first edge of sunrise catches the glass. Whatever happens next, I tell myself, the story will no longer be written without me. The morning of the unveiling arrives calm and bright, the kind of clear day that would normally lift my mood. But my apartment feels still as if the air itself is waiting. I move through the motions coffee-quiet music, a final glance at the folder of documents stacked neatly on my desk. Every piece of evidence, every photo and report now stored digitally organized and complete. For the first time, the story of my work and my worth no longer depends on anyone else's version. I slip my speech and the updated Foundation report into my bag before heading out the door. When I arrive at the estate, the front lawn is lined with black cars and trimmed lanterns. Staff move briskly between the entryway and the grand hall, voices low but urgent. Inside, the air smells faintly of roses and polished wood, that familiar scent of every Parker event. Brooke's laughter echoes down the corridor. She stands surrounded by photographers, emerald dress catching the light like glass. My mother hovers close by, giving soft instructions about camera angles and floral arrangements. Ava. She calls her tone tight but polite. You're over there. She points toward the far corner of the room where the extended family is gathered. I nod and take my place, my charcoal gray dress deliberately plain among all the shimmer. My father arrives a few minutes later, his stride measured, his smile practiced. Good everyone's here, he says. Let's make this a night to remember. His eyes pass over me once without pause, moving instead to Brooke, whose expression mirrors his confidence. I've seen this performance before. The handshake, the applause, the glint of approval that never turns my way. But tonight, something in me has shifted. I'm no longer hoping for their gaze to land on me. I'm simply watching. The first part of the evening runs like a schedule printed months in advance. Guests mingle over champagne, board members exchange polite compliments, and the family portrait remains veiled at the front of the room, draped in deep velvet. I stay near the edge, greeting familiar faces from the Foundation, my voice calm and even. Then I spot Dr. Franklin approaching with several members of my research team, all dressed in evening attire. We wouldn't miss this, he says quietly. You deserve to be recognized. His words warm the air around us like a steady flame. My mother sees them, her brow tightening in confusion. You brought your colleagues, she asks under her breath. They insisted I say. They're part of the Parker Foundation's success, aren't they? She doesn't respond, only turns away to adjust a floral centerpiece. When the coordinator announces that the official photos will begin soon, my mother returns her tone rehearsed. Ava, when the photographer calls for the family shot, please stand a little behind Brooke. The lighting will focus on her and your father. I meet her eyes steady and clear. I've been standing in the back my whole life, I say quietly. I won't do it anymore. Her face stills, the practiced smile fading at the edges. This isn't the time for dramatics, she whispers. It's not dramatics, I answer. It's acknowledgement. Before she can respond, Dr. Franklin steps forward, greeting her with a polite nod. Mrs. Parker, he says, I hope you don't mind, but our department wanted to support our director tonight. The title lands between us like a chord struck clean. Director, she repeats. Yes, Dr. Franklin continues. Ava's been leading our research team through a groundbreaking project, secured 3 patents this quarter alone. My mother blinks once, uncertain. Then, perhaps realizing others are listening, she smiles thinly. How wonderful. The event coordinator calls everyone toward the grand hall for the unveiling. I glance at the velvet cover draped across the portrait and feel my hands still. The photographer begins arranging the family in position, my father in the center, Brooke beside him, my mother angled slightly forward. Ava, step back, please, the photographer says. My father gestures lightly, his hand pressing against my shoulder to guide me behind them. Perfect, he says to the photographer. I step forward instead, meeting his eyes. I'm fine where I am. His brow tightens, but before he can reply, Doctor. Franklin and my team shift closer, their presence forming a quiet wall beside me. The flash goes off, capturing a frame I know I'll remember the moment I decided not to fade. As the room settles, the hum of conversation grows again. I hear Daniel Price's voice near the podium discussing lighting cues and sound checks. My father makes rounds with board members, shaking hands and smiling, his charm effortless. Brooke rehearses her brief speech, reading from her notes. I stand by a small side table, watching the reflection of the chandelier in my glass. Ruth Larkin, the artist, joins me, her champagne untouched. You held your ground, she murmurs. Not many people do in that family. I give a small nod. You gave me something honest, I say. She studies me for a moment. Honesty deserves to be seen. The announcement for opening remarks echoes through the hall, drawing everyone's attention toward the stage. My father steps forward, first delivering his practiced speech about legacy and leadership, the company's vision, and Brooke's role as the face of the next generation. Applause follows at all the right moments. Then Brooke takes the microphone, her voice clear and confident. I'm honored to represent our family's ongoing pursuit of excellence. She begins, pausing to smile at the crowd. Every generation builds upon the last. I stand here as proof of that foundation. Her words land softly polished to perfection until she adds, as the only Parker actively driving innovation within the company, I'm proud to continue what my father started. The room hums with approval, but I notice a few faces turn board members who know better, researchers who recognize the omission. Dr. Franklin's jaw tightens slightly. I stay silent, the decision already forming in my mind. After her speech, the photographer calls for the official family photo once more. Just the immediate family, please, he says, motioning for me to step aside. I feel my father's hand on my arm, gentle but firm, guiding me backward. It's all right, Ava, he says quietly. We'll do another one with everyone later. My phone rests in my palm, the camera already open. I angle it just enough to capture the scene, Brooke and my parents framed perfectly, the photographer calling for one more as I stand a few steps behind the space between us, deliberate. When the flash goes off, I take my own picture, documenting not just the portrait, but the moment itself. As the evening continues, conversations drift toward Brooke's promotion and the magazine spread scheduled for next week. Daniel Price hovers nearby, taking notes, occasionally snapping photos for reference. He's polite but distracted until Dr. Franklin approaches him mid-discussion. You've met Ava Parker, haven't you? He asks. Daniel glances at me, recognition flickering. Of course, he says, extending a hand. You're in research, right? I return the handshake, my voice steady. I lead the biomedical team at Northridge Institute. We're developing targeted protein therapies for neurodegenerative diseases. The words fall naturally, now practiced, but proud. Daniel's eyes sharpen with interest. Protein therapies, he repeats, similar to the Lasker winning project last year. Same foundation, I say, different application. A few board members drift closer, drawn by curiosity. Dr. Franklin joins in his voice, carrying easily across the small group. Ava's team just received preliminary approval for a major research grant, he says, one of the largest in the field this year. The conversation deepens questions about methodology and results filling the space. My father watches from across the room, his expression unreadable. Brooke's smile falters slightly as the attention shifts, her champagne glass lowering. For the first time, the circle around me expands instead of closing. By the time the coordinator announces the final call for the unveiling, the room feels different. The lighting seems softer, the air quieter. My mother glances around, sensing the shift she can't control. The velvet cover still hangs over the portrait, ready to reveal the image that started everything. I step back, my pulse steady, my voice even as I say to Dr. Franklin, "I think it's time." He nods once, a silent affirmation. Across the room, my father adjusts his tie, his gaze meeting mine for a fraction of a second before turning away. The ceremony is about to begin, but the outcome feels already in motion. And for the first time in years, I'm not bracing for erasure. I'm preparing to be seen. The portrait unveiling begins with the rustle of silk and the hush of expectation. Guests gather near the stage glasses, lifted halfway, voices lowering as the lights dim. The velvet drape still hides the painting that set everything in motion, its shadow stretching across the polished floor. I stand near the front, my research team behind me, their quiet presence like a steady pulse. The Master of Ceremonies welcomes everyone, praising the Parker legacy, and then invites my father to speak. His voice fills the hall, smooth and commanding. He thanks the guests, acknowledges Brooke's promotion, and outlines the family's vision for the future. Every word follows a familiar pattern: heritage, innovation, leadership, all carefully chosen to circle around one name. When my father steps aside, Brooke takes the microphone. She looks luminous under the stage lights, confident in the role she was born to play. As my father said, this moment represents more than family. She begins, her tone polished. It's about carrying forward the ideals that built Parker Industries: discipline, focus, and unity. She pauses for effect, smiling at the audience. Every generation contributes something unique, but leadership means being willing to stand at the center of it all. The applause is immediate, loud, and approving. I feel my chest tighten, not from anger, but from the deep, quiet recognition of what those words mean. She's drawing a circle, and I'm standing outside of it. The photographer calls for the official portraits next. "Immediate family first," he says. My father motions for Brooke and my mother to step forward. "Ava, let's do one after this," he adds, guiding me gently aside. The lights brighten, the cameras flash, and in that moment something inside me stills. I watch their practiced smiles, their ease in that light, and I realize I've been standing in the same half-shadow for years, part of the family, but never of it. I raise my phone and quietly take a photo of the scene, framing it, just as the photographer calls for one more. The image captures everything words have failed to show: who they are and where they believe I belong. Ruth, the portrait artist, appears beside me again, a champagne flute in hand. Her voice is low, almost an apology. "I tried to balance the composition," she says. They insisted on the focus. I meet her eyes. "You gave me enough," I tell her. "You left room for truth." She nods, her expression softening. Sometimes truth survives where light doesn't reach. As the guests drift toward the refreshment tables, Daniel Price approaches, still holding his notebook from earlier. "You're Ava Parker, right?" he asks, his tone curious but cautious. "What's your role in the company?" It's a question I've been asked 100 times, always answered the same way, with humility and brevity. But tonight, something shifts. I meet his gaze and answer clearly. "I lead biomedical research at Northridge Institute. My team develops targeted protein therapies for neurodegenerative conditions." The nearby conversation falters, attention shifting our way. Daniel tilts his head, "Like the research that won the Lasker last year." "Similar approach," I reply. Different application. A few people drift closer. Board members, investors, even a few of my father's colleagues. Dr. Franklin joins us, his presence calm but firm. Ava's work has just received major recognition, he adds, his voice carrying easily across the small group. Her team secured one of the largest research grants in the field this year. There's a ripple of surprise followed by murmurs. My father turns from across the room, catching sight of the small crowd forming around us. I see the confusion flicker behind his composed expression. Sharon Bell, one of the board members, steps forward. "I've read your paper on protein refolding," she says, her tone warm. "Your data on early intervention is remarkable." I nod in thanks, steady but measured. Brooke glances over, her smile faltering for the first time that evening. Daniel flips open his notebook. "How is this not being showcased by Parker Industries?" he asks. The question hangs in the air, quiet but pointed. My father clears his throat. "Ava's work is in a separate capacity," he says smoothly. "We support it through our foundation, of course, but her focus is academic." Sharon lifts a brow. "Still, that kind of innovation could redefine your medical division." His jaw tightens just slightly before he smiles. "We'll see what the future holds." The energy in the room changes. Guests are talking less about the portrait and more about the project they've just learned exists. Dr. Franklin takes the opportunity to describe the upcoming trials, the promising data, the national interest. Linda Cho, ever the observer, slips quietly beside Sharon with a tablet in hand. "I have the press brief from the Foundation archives," she says, showing a photo of me at 20 hands on a microscope, focused unaware of the camera. "Ava's been leading this work since her doctoral studies." Daniel studies the screen, then looks up at my father. "That's quite a legacy," he says. "Seems like innovation runs in the family." Brooke sets down her glass a bit too hard, the sound sharp against the polished table. Maybe she says her smile tight. But innovation isn't the same as leadership. Her words hang there, brittle and thin. Dr. Franklin turns to her, polite but unyielding. "Leadership takes many forms," he replies. "Sometimes it's standing in a lab at 2 a.m. solving a problem no one else can." The group nods in quiet agreement. My father, sensing the loss of control, gestures toward the covered portrait. "Let's proceed," he says firmly. "It's time to unveil what this evening is truly about." But no one moves right away. The applause from earlier doesn't return. Instead, there's a low hum of voices discussing research grants and names that have nothing to do with him or Brooke. I stand still, the weight of that shift settling over me. Not victory, not defiance, just the quiet gravity of being seen. When the crowd finally gathers near the stage, my father glances toward me, his expression caught between irritation and calculation. "We'll talk later," he says quietly as he passes. I nod once, calm, almost detached. Ruth meets my eyes across the room, giving a small, knowing smile before returning to her place by the curtain rope. As the velvet drape is lifted, the portrait is revealed at last. Brooke glowing at the center, my parents proud beside her, and me half-shadowed behind them. The audience murmurs polite approval, but the applause feels subdued, distracted, as eyes drift toward the conversation that began minutes earlier. When the formalities end, my father corners me near the refreshment table. His smile is tight, his hand firm on my elbow. "We could commission another portrait," he says softly, "something for the research wing." His voice is pleasant, but the undertone is unmistakable. A separate piece that highlights your academic side. I meet his gaze. Separate, I repeat. Out of sight, where it won't confuse anyone. He hesitates, then leans closer. "Remember who funds your building lease." The warning is quiet, familiar. I take a slow breath, just enough to steady myself. Before I can answer, Dr. Franklin approaches again, holding an envelope embossed with the National Science Foundation seal. "This came for you this morning," he says. "Congratulations, Director Parker." I open it carefully, the paper crisp beneath my fingers. The amount printed across the page is staggering: 5 years of independent funding, unrestricted, fully separate from family oversight. I look up, meeting my father's eyes. "It's official," I say. "The Biomedical Innovation Grant, full funding, independent review." For a moment, neither of us speaks. Then I tuck the letter into my purse and straighten my shoulders. "I won't need to be in your portrait," I tell him. "I've got my own canvas now." He exhales slowly, regaining his composure. That's unexpected news, he says, the corners of his mouth twitching toward a smile that doesn't reach his eyes. Before he can recover, the coordinator calls for closing remarks. The crowd begins to gather again, waiting for someone to take the podium. My father turns toward the stage, but I step forward instead. The room stills, all eyes shifting in my direction. My voice comes easily now, even over the hum of whispers. The Parker legacy has always been about vision, I begin. Tonight, I'd like to share another kind. I reach into my purse and press the small remote I've hidden there. Across the wall behind me, a projection flares to life photos from the lab my team at work. Our discoveries displayed like a timeline of quiet progress. The final image appears last, the cover of Scientific Horizons, next month's issue, featuring our breakthrough treatment protocol. The silence holds for a beat, then applause breaks out, steady, genuine, growing louder, until it fills the hall. I see Dr. Franklin smiling in the front row, Ruth wiping at her eyes, Linda standing near the back with pride shining through her calm expression. My father remains by the stage motionless, while the velvet portrait behind him glows under the soft light forgotten. When I step down from the podium, Brooke meets my eyes across the room. For the first time, there's no superiority there, only uncertainty. She nods once, a small acknowledgement that feels like a shift in gravity. I return the nod and walk toward the exit, the applause still echoing behind me. Tonight, for the first time, I don't feel like I'm stepping out of the light. I'm carrying my own with me. The applause from my presentation still hums in the air when I step down from the stage. For a moment, I don't move. The lights are bright, the room alive with conversation, yet everything feels strangely quiet. Guests drift toward the projection still playing on the far wall, my team's faces frozen mid-laugh in a lab photo that had never been meant for display. My father stands near the velvet-draped portrait, his posture stiff, his expression unreadable. Brooke's glass of champagne hangs at her side, the condensation slipping through her fingers as she watches the room redirect its attention toward me. Dr. Franklin approaches with a smile that reaches his eyes. "You handled that beautifully," he says, shaking my hand as if we've just finished a press conference. "You gave them something real." Behind him, Linda Cho exchanges a quiet nod with Ruth Larkin, the artist who looks visibly relieved. For years, her work had been used to showcase the image my family wanted the world to see. Tonight, it served a different purpose. It stood as a contrast. As guests gather around to ask about the grant and the research, I find myself answering with ease. Each question opens another door, each conversation carrying a sense of respect I've never felt in this house before. Sharon Bell leans in close, her tone thoughtful. "Ava, your father's been sitting on a gold mine," she says. "Why hasn't Parker Industries integrated your work into their medical division?" I start to answer, but before I can, my father steps forward. Because he says smoothly, "Ava's focus is academic. We've supported her from the beginning." His voice is warm, his smile practiced, but the tension around his eyes gives him away. Sharon studies him for a beat too long before offering a polite nod. When the last round of applause fades and the music resumes, my father gestures for me to follow him to the far corner of the hall. "That was impressive," he says quietly. "You should have told me about the presentation. We could have coordinated it better." The word coordinated catches like a thorn. I meet his gaze evenly. "It wasn't part of the family program," I say. "It was part of mine." He adjusts his cufflinks, buying time. "I understand you're proud of the grant, but public events like this require balance. You don't want to overshadow what the evening was meant to celebrate." I hold his eyes for a long moment, the realization sinking in. "You mean Brooke?" His expression softens just enough to sound paternal. "You both shine differently. But there's a hierarchy to these things, Ava. Optics matter." The urge to argue passes as quickly as it comes. I step back, letting his words hang where they belong. Dr. Franklin joins us again, holding his phone. "I just received a message from Scientific Horizons," he says. "They're requesting an interview for their cover story. They want to feature the lab in next month's issue." My father's composure slips for a fraction of a second, then returns as he offers a thin smile. "Well," he says, "perhaps that's your moment, Ava. It's good to see you finally getting the recognition you've worked for." He says it like a blessing, but it lands more like a dismissal. Later, as guests begin to leave, Brooke approaches. Her voice is soft, almost uncertain. "We need to talk," she says, stepping aside so no one overhears. "You blindsided everyone tonight." I glance toward the projection now dimming as technicians power down the equipment. "I shared my work," I say. "That shouldn't blindside anyone." Her eyes narrow slightly. "You made it about you." I take a slow breath. I made it accurate. She doesn't respond right away. For the first time in years, her confidence falters. When she finally speaks, her voice sounds smaller. "You made Dad look weak." I shake my head. He did that himself. Her lips press together, and she walks away before I can say anything more. By the time I leave the estate, the night air feels sharp and clear. The sky above the driveway is scattered with faint stars, their light dimmed by the city beyond the trees. I pause beside my car, glancing back at the glowing windows of the grand hall. Through the glass, I can still see the portrait hanging in perfect symmetry on the far wall, surrounded by fading chatter and champagne glasses left half full. I unlock the car and sit for a moment before starting the engine. The silence that fills the cabin feels cleaner than anything that came before it. In the days that follow, the ripple from that evening spreads faster than I expect. Industry emails arrive congratulating the lab on the grant. Invitations to speak at conferences begin to appear. For years, my name sat in the background of press releases. Now it's at the top of headlines I didn't write. Dr. Franklin stops by my office one morning leaning against the doorframe. "They're asking if we're open to investors," he says. "Apparently your little unveiling turned into quite the public debut." I glance at the growing stack of messages on my desk and smile faintly. "We'll handle it carefully," I tell him, "but it's nice to be noticed for the work." A week later, I meet with my legal advisor to finalize the transfer of my lab's lease. For the first time, it's independent of the Parker Foundation. No signatures required from my father, no oversight from the family board. The new plaque on the building reads simply, "The Parker Regenerative Research Center, privately funded by the National Science Foundation." I run my fingers across the letters before unlocking the door for the morning meeting. That evening, I receive a call from my mother. Her voice carries a measured calm. "Your father's birthday dinner is next month," she says. "We'd like you to come." I hesitate, hearing the unspoken condition in her tone. "It would mean a lot if we could put that evening behind us," she adds. I ask if Brooke will be there. "Of course," she replies as though it's obvious. "We're still family." I agree, if only to avoid prolonging the silence that stretches between us. The following weekend, I walk into the lab to find my team gathered around the new prototype display. The data graphs line the wall like artwork color-coded proof of progress. "We're nearing clinical readiness," Dr. Franklin says, eyes bright. "This could be the breakthrough we've been chasing." I nod, studying the screen. For the first time in years, my work feels untethered, no longer shadowed by family expectations or nameplates. When the meeting ends, I step into my office and close the door. On my desk sits the photograph I took during the unveiling, the one where my father had guided me back from the center. I slip it into a drawer and replace it with a new image my team gathered around the microscope, laughing mid-conversation light, catching the curve of the beaker beside them. That's the portrait that matters now. In early spring, a courier delivers a small envelope embossed with the Parker family crest. Inside is a card announcing Brooke's feature in American Enterprise, the same magazine that once ignored me. The headline reads, "Brooke Parker, the new face of legacy leadership." I set it aside and open my laptop. Minutes later, an email pings in from Scientific Horizons confirming their cover layout. The attached proof shows my photo lab coat, unbuttoned, smile faint. The caption beneath it, simple, Dr. Ava Parker, the scientist, redefining the future of regeneration. That evening, as I leave work, the reflection in the glass doors catches me off guard. For a moment, I see the faint outline of my grandmother's sapphire necklace around Brooke's neck in that old portrait, and then my own silver pendant shining under the hallway light. The two images overlap for just a second before I step outside. When I reach my car, my phone vibrates with a text from Brooke. "Dinner next week, just us." I stare at the screen, surprised. Then I type back, "Yes." The message sends, and I slip the phone into my bag. The night air feels cooler than before, carrying the scent of early rain. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolls softly, not as a warning, but as a change in weather. Tomorrow, the magazine issue will go to print. Next month, the clinical trials will begin. And soon, the Parker name will stand for more than just business dinners and gilded portraits. It will stand for something that can't be dimmed by lighting or erased by omission. I start the engine and drive toward the city lights, the road stretching ahead like an open promise. By the time spring settles fully over the city, the rhythm of my life feels almost unrecognizable. The lab hums from morning until dusk, meetings blending into experiments and updates from the National Science Foundation. Investors visit weekly now, their polished shoes echoing across the tiled hallway that bears my name. I've learned to navigate that sound, the blend of curiosity and respect that follows it. What once felt like borrowed light has become something steady, something earned. The evening of my father's birthday arrives crisp and clear, a sharp contrast to the tension I remember from last year's celebrations. The estate looks unchanged from the outside, its sweeping driveway lined with lanterns and trimmed hedges, but something in me has shifted. I park near the gate instead of the front, letting myself walk the last stretch up the curved stone path. Inside, voices float through the open doors, familiar laughter silver against glass, a melody I've known all my life. My mother greets me first, her smile warm but measured. "You look lovely," she says, her eyes flicking over the navy dress I chose, understated but professional. "We're just about to start the family photo. Come join us." She leads me toward the grand hall, where the old portrait still hangs, now framed beneath new lighting. Brooke stands near it, radiant as always, her husband beside her, their polished ease fitting neatly into the scene. My father is at the center, beaming as if nothing in the world could touch him. Everyone's squeezed together. The photographer calls his tone cheerful and brisk. "Let's get one for the records." I take my place beside my mother, and for a moment, the familiar choreography begins. Brooke at the front, my parents angled toward her, the same arrangement that's been rehearsed for decades. Then comes the quiet instruction I've heard countless times before. "Miss Parker, could you step back a little? You're blocking your sister." The request lands softly, but it cuts through the air like glass. My father starts to shift aside, ready to guide me the way he always has. I meet his eyes instead and hold my ground. Actually, I say evenly, I'm comfortable right where I am. The silence stretches small but certain. My mother's breath catches Brooke's eyes, flick toward the photographer, waiting for him to insist. But before anyone speaks, my father moves just a fraction, half a step to his left, creating space rather than taking it away. My mother follows, adjusting her stance. Brooke hesitates, then turns her shoulders slightly. The photographer glances up, sensing the tension, and then easing into it. "Perfect," he says, finally snapping the frame. The flash pops bright and quick. The moment passes, but the air feels lighter somehow. Dinner unfolds in soft waves after that. The conversation is polite, cautious, even like everyone's testing the new shape of things. My father talks about the company's next venture, my mother about a charity gala. Brooke mentions her article in American Enterprise, her voice carrying the practiced confidence of someone who's used to applause. I listen, smile, respond when spoken to. When the dessert plates are cleared, my father raises his glass. To family, he says, and to legacy. Everyone echoes the toast, though the words feel different this time, heavier and truer in the quiet that follows. Later, when the guests drift toward the parlor, my mother finds me standing near the window that overlooks the gardens. "You handled that beautifully," she says softly. "I wasn't sure how tonight would go." I glance toward my father now, surrounded by old colleagues laughing easily. Neither was I admit. She studies me for a moment, her expression gentler than I've seen in years. "You've grown into yourself, Ava. Your grandmother would have loved to see this." Then she turns and joins the others before I can reply. The next afternoon, I meet Ruth Larkin and Dr. Franklin for lunch at Romano's, the little restaurant near the lab that's become something of a tradition for us. Ruth lifts her glass when I arrive. "To being seen clearly," she says with a grin. Dr. Franklin chuckles. "And to keeping the right people in the picture this time." We laugh, the sound easy and unguarded. Over pasta and coffee, we talk about the new expansion plans, the possibility of partnering with local universities. For once, the conversation isn't about survival, it's about growth. After lunch, Ruth leans across the table. You know, she says the gallery downtown is hosting a portrait series on women in science next month. They'd like to include you. I raise a brow. Another portrait? She smiles. This time you choose the frame. The thought lingers as I drive back to the lab. The idea of being captured again on my own terms feels both foreign and fitting. 2 weeks later, I sit in the artist's studio, the air filled with the scent of oil paint and quiet music. The canvas behind me shows the first soft outlines of what will become the finished piece. I'm not wearing an evening gown or standing beside family. Instead, I'm seated at a lab bench, my coat draped over a chair, the faint glow of microscopes and glass beakers in the background. Through the window, my team is visible, laughing, working unaware of the camera. The artist pauses to adjust the light and nods approvingly. "This feels like you," she says. I look at the canvas and realize she's right. When I return to the lab later that day, a small package waits on my desk. Inside is a framed miniature of the family portrait, the same one from the unveiling, scaled down to fit in the palm of my hand. There's no note, just the faint imprint of my mother's handwriting on the shipping label. I turn it over once, then set it on the corner of my bookshelf, tucked between a research award and a photograph of my team celebrating our first published study. It no longer feels like a wound, just a reminder of where the story began. That evening, as I walk through the quiet lab, the light from the city spills across the glass windows, soft and golden. My reflection catches for a moment the lab behind me, the skyline beyond the life I built between them. It's not grand or dramatic, but it's mine. I pause there for a long time, listening to the hum of machines and the faint rhythm of footsteps in the hallway. When I finally turn off the lights and step outside, the air carries the first hint of summer. My phone buzzes with a message from Brooke. "Dinner went well. I'm glad you came." Another follows a moment later. "I'm proud of you." I stop on the sidewalk, the glow of the screen lighting my hands. Then I type back simply, "Thanks. I'm proud of you too." The city around me moves at its usual pace, cars, passing lights, changing voices fading into night. I walk toward my car, each step lighter than the one before. Tomorrow will bring meetings, deadlines, decisions to make. But tonight, I let the quiet settle. The years of being shadowed, silenced, edited out, they've turned into something stronger, something that can't be erased anymore. And as I drive home, the thought follows me like a steady heartbeat. I didn't just step out of their portrait. I built one of my own. The months that follow settle into a rhythm that feels both steady and new. The lab expands, the team grows, and for the first time, our work moves beyond theory into practice. We start hearing from families whose lives might change because of what we've built. Letters from patients, notes from doctors, quiet messages of hope that land in my inbox, like small reminders of why all of it mattered. The grant has turned from numbers on a page into something living, something that breathes beyond me. One morning, I stand in front of the wall in my office that holds a collage of moments from this journey, our first team photo. The framed article from Scientific Horizons and a single image of my grandmother's handwriting always find the light, even if they don't give you any. It's written on a torn recipe card she used to keep in her kitchen. I look at it often when I need grounding. A few weeks later, I'm invited to speak at a science leadership conference in Boston. The keynote room is larger than any place I've ever stood before, rows of faces stretching far into the distance. When the introduction ends, I step to the podium and take a slow breath. I talk about the research, but I also talk about the years that shaped it, the years when silence felt like the only safe language, when I learned that invisibility has weight. The audience doesn't need every detail, but they understand the truth behind the words. By the time I finish, the room is quiet in that full, meaningful way that says something has landed. Afterward, a young woman approaches, maybe mid-20s, with a badge that reads Graduate Fellow. She hesitates, then says, "I almost gave up on my project because I couldn't get anyone to take me seriously. Hearing you today, it helps." I smile and tell her the same thing Dr. Franklin once told me, that every voice worth hearing starts as an echo until someone listens. She nods, eyes bright, and I know she'll remember it. The following weekend, the new portrait of me painted by the artist Ruth recommended debuts in the Downtown Gallery's Women of Discovery exhibit. It's smaller than the one my family commissioned years ago, but it carries more truth. I'm not posed in grandeur. I'm simply seated at a lab table, sleeves rolled up, pen in hand, with sunlight filtering through the window behind me. My reflection is mirrored faintly in the glass wall that separates me from my team. When I stand before it, I don't feel pride so much as peace. Ruth joins me, smiling. "You see," she says quietly, "you don't need light painted around you anymore. You've become it." My mother visits the gallery the next day. She arrives alone, her usual formality softened by time. We walk together without saying much. When she stops in front of the portrait, she studies it for a long time, her expression unreadable. Finally, she says, "Your father would have liked this one." I don't correct her, even though I know that what she means is that he might finally have understood it. Before she leaves, she reaches out, smoothing an invisible crease on my sleeve. "I'm proud of you, Ava," she says quietly. We both are. The words are simple, almost fragile, but they land with the weight of years. That evening, Brooke calls from her office in Chicago. She's been managing a new corporate initiative, one focused on medical innovation grants. "I used your research proposal as our benchmark," she tells me. "We're trying to fund more scientists who work independently like you." There's no bitterness in her voice now, only a kind of earnestness I haven't heard since we were teenagers. "You did good, Ava," she says. "You really did." I thank her, and for once the space between us feels like connection, not competition. Life moves forward quietly after that. I split my time between the lab and the mentorship program I helped start for young researchers. Some days are long, some breakthroughs small, but each one feels earned. And on the rare mornings when I stop at my parents' house, the family portrait still hangs where it always has. Brooke glowing in the center, my parents beside her, and the faint figure of me in shadow. Yet it no longer stings. It's part of the story, a reminder of where I began. The real picture of my life now hangs elsewhere, in faces in work, in the quiet proof of change. Looking back, I realized the hardest part was never being overlooked. It was learning that I didn't need permission to be seen. Recognition fades, awards gather dust, but dignity, the kind that comes from standing in your own light, stays. My grandmother was right. You don't find your place by waiting for others to make room. You find it by building something so solid that it can't be erased. So if you're listening to this and carrying your own version of that shadow, don't mistake quiet for weakness. Sometimes silence is just the sound of strength gathering its voice, and when your moment comes, step into it fully. If this story spoke to you, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and take a moment to subscribe so you don't miss the next one. You never know who's waiting for a reminder that it's never too late to be seen.